We're so glad that you guys are here with us today. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on how to be a no-brainer tech hire. We're going to get started now. And we're really excited to be here. If you have questions, I think you can put them into the webinar question box while we're chatting, or while I'm chatting, and then we'll have a chance to answer some of those at the end of the presentation, so you can just pop them in there. You can also tweet us at any time at Flatiron School. We check that all day long. So to kick off, I'm Rebekah, really excited to be here talking with you guys today. I am our head of career services at Flatiron School, and I've been here doing that since 2013. So since almost the beginning of Flatiron School. That means I've seen, helped out with, overseen, been directly involved in about 1,000 job searches, which is, you know, the most rewarding thing I think you can do is help people find a new job that they love over and over again. It's a pretty amazing thing to be able to watch, and having seen all of those searches over the years, we've really figured out what makes a great hire, what companies respond to over and over again, and through the years we've built a set of recommendations and actually a whole team around supporting graduates in running a great job search. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the components of that. What is it to go through a job search with Flatiron School? And even if you're going through a different job search, right, these things are pretty applicable. What can you do to be a great hire, to be a no-brainer hire, right, to be a great job seeker and a no-brainer to get hired? Before we kick off into how we work with students to make themselves no-brainer hires after Flatiron School, I'm going to tell a story about my first job and not being a no-brainer hire at the beginning of my job search. So when I graduated from college, I was going to be a writer. I was an English major. I was editor of my college newspaper. I had all the credentials that I thought companies would want to hire a writer. I had the extracurriculars. I thought I was a good writer. I had a portfolio for them to look at. I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, and so I applied for a bunch of jobs as a writer. I got no responses, none, crickets, radio silence. And that was pretty disheartening because I thought I had been doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And you know, in the spring of senior year, in the throes of sort of freaking out about having to find a job, I took a freelance writing gig. I think I was making $20 a blog post or something in that range, plus free lip gloss that I was reviewing. And I thought I would do that to continue to build my portfolio because I could not figure out why I wasn't getting a job. I took that job and I worked my butt off and I wrote a crap load of blog posts for $20 each. And the editor of that publication actually offered me a full-time job after graduation. So I graduated, I think, on a Friday, and I think I started work on a Wednesday. And it wasn't because I applied to jobs, and it definitely was not because of my credentials. It was because I demonstrated that I wanted this so badly that I was willing to put aside part of senior spring to do extra work and prove myself for this one publication. So that's a theme that will continue to emerge as we talk about what you can do to be a no-brainer hire and how we wrap those strategies into our support at Flatiron School. All right, enough of my face. So our agenda for this afternoon, we'll talk a little bit about Flatiron School's outcomes so far, and a little bit about what a no-brainer hire is. What do we mean when we say that? Then we'll get into some of the specifics around how you can utilize that to pursue a career in technology for your first job as a developer, making the most out of your tech interview, and some specific ways that our graduates have gotten creative around demonstrating their no-brainer hire-ness in their interview processes. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. I promise you, I will not talk for the full hour without stopping for questions. So a little bit about Flatiron School's outcomes. Flatiron School's been around since 2012, and we actually we're the first school to do audited, third-party verified outcomes reporting in this industry. Since we put out our first outcomes report in 2014, we put out outcomes reports every year, and I've actually had every single student that's come through our career-focused programs audited by a third party to verify that the outcomes we have on file for them are correct, and we report those annually. We just released our 2017 report for our New York City programs yesterday, and the results are as good as ever. So the report shows 97% of our job seekers have accepted a job by the time they complete their work with career services, and over 99% of those jobs were in technical roles. So again, all of these successful job searches have really taught us what a successful job search looks like, and what one should be doing throughout that process to really be attractive to a company. So what is that? What does that mean? We've built a bunch of supports and content and suggestions around what a no-brainer hire is. But really, to understand this concept, I think it's important to think about what an employer is looking for in an interview process. What are they trying to figure out? And so what do you want to show them? I think the biggest fallacy of job searching and interviewing is that the interview process is a series of hurdles that you have to jump over, like a series of yes or no questions where you need to keep getting a yes, and at the end of that straight line is a job. That is completely false, right? So this is it's not straightforward to figure these things out. And being a no-brainer hire really means you demonstrate throughout all of your touch points in a hiring process that you are or can do these three things. So what are those things? Can you do the job? When an employer is interviewing you, one of the first things and most important things they're trying to figure out is, do you have the capacity to execute what you're going to be required to do in this position? We'll talk about some ways you can demonstrate that, but for a technical hire, come with a portfolio. For new technologists, talk about why you're committed and how much you've learned, how fast you've learned it, to show what you can do now, even if you don't have the work experience to articulate that in your background. But first and foremost, right, this is probably an obvious one, can you do the job we're going to hire you for? The second thing employers are looking for is, broadly, can you add value to the team? So will you be a good person to work with? Will you create positive communication throughout the team? Will you be additive to the culture of the company? And demonstrating this throughout the job search process, I think, is something people think about a little bit less frequently. Showing you can add value to the team, though, is actually it's a really easy way to make yourself stand out. So how can you do that throughout the interview process? We'll talk a little bit more about this, but contribute something during the interview process, right? Ask the company not just what are the specific requirements of this job and responsibilities of this job, but maybe ask the CTO or the VP of engineering, what are the biggest challenges facing the company right now? What keeps you up at night? What are you thinking about that you don't have a solution for yet? After the interview, if you go home and think about those challenges and come up with a solution or a suggestion or a plan or project that might help solve them, you've already made yourself stand out far and away above other candidates. So employers are looking for, can you do the job? Outside your kind of technical ability to do the job, can you add value to the team and the company? And then the third one is, can you learn really fast? So particularly in technology roles, you're always going to need to learn new skills to stay current. Even if you're in the same role, the stack might change, the version will definitely change, the version of the software that you're using or the language that you're using. And the way you do that job is not going to be the same in 5 years as it is when you're hired. So again, particularly in technology, employers are going to be looking for how fast can you learn, and do I have confidence that when our way of executing changes, when our process changes, when our technology stack changes, are you going to be able to stay up to speed with that? And again, we'll talk about this, but ways you can demonstrate that are, I've seen students recently who went through Flatiron School, so they're learning Ruby and JavaScript and Rails and React, and they're interviewing for jobs in Java. And actually, a lot of our students end up accepting jobs in Python, Java, PHP, Node, other languages and frameworks primarily. They didn't learn here. A great way to demonstrate you can learn fast is to build something in that language, something small, and show it to the employer, right? Even if you're not asked to, even if it's not part of the interview process, there's no better way to show that you can learn than to actually learn during the interview process and demonstrate that you've done that to the employer. So as we're thinking about being a no-brainer hire and how you can do that, it's important to, I think, keep these three things in mind and just put yourself in the interviewer's shoes and say, everything that I do in this process, they're trying to figure out one of these three things. Can I do the job? Can I broadly add value to the team? And can I learn really fast? So with that in mind, we've used these concepts to develop a bunch of recommendations and supports for graduates of Flatiron School to prepare them and guide them through a job search. So what are those things? There's four main things that we do and have available for grads that get them ready for and guide them through a job search. One is a job search framework called our Career Services Commitment. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's kind of like nuts and bolts, in the simplest terms, the requirements of running like a bare minimum good job search, right? So you need to do at least these things in order to be running a good job search. We'll talk more about what those are later, but they include connecting with employers, continuing to code, things you probably are already thinking about if you're looking for a job in technology. Career prep curriculum. So the career prep curriculum, just like there's curriculum on Learn for technical skills, and students move through that and they learn those skills, we also have a completely separate track that's just about how to get a job. And these are non-technical skills. There's nothing technical in there. This is like how to write an email to an employer. What the heck do I say during a networking meeting? What is networking and how should I even start doing that? What are employers looking for when I go into a technical interview? How should I be approaching that? So the career prep curriculum is a track that we ask students to start around 80-ish% of the way through their technical curriculum so they can prepare in concert for the soft skills part of the job search and the strategic part of the job search. The career prep curriculum really guides our students through how to execute our job search framework in a way that will make them successful. And we have yet another layer of support on top of that, which is career counseling. So you've got your framework, which is like, do this, do this, do this, the specific things you need to do, bare minimum, to be successful. The career prep curriculum kind of guides you through how to execute that stuff in a way that is thoughtful and will set you up for success. And your career counselor is really kind of your individualized help in doing all of that. So every graduate of our career focused programs gets paired with a career counselor, and they meet usually once a week to talk through what's going on in a student's job search. Career counselors help with the stuff that is unique to you, and we might not be able to address specifically in the curriculum track. So working with a student who was a pig farmer for about a decade before he came to Flatiron School. He was a programmer before that, but he took a significant break from programming to be a pig farmer. How do I talk about that? How do I talk to an employer about my background if it's not obvious how I got here in a way that will make them really excited to work with me and hire me? Or I'm going through this interview process, and there's a step in the interview process that's write a coloring book. I don't know what this is for. I don't know how to write a coloring book. How do I know that that's going to be a good coloring book to get me the job? All kinds of weird stuff that happens through the interview process. Your career counselor is the person who's there to talk you through it all the way through to the end when, if you get a job offer and you're not sure if it's right for you, or is this market salary, or how do I even talk about salary? All of that stuff is what your career counselor is there for. Finally, employer evangelism is kind of the last piece of this puzzle. We have a whole team here under the career services umbrella who just spend their days building and maintaining relationships with employers with the goal of evangelizing for Flatiron School grads. So we have relationships with employers all over the country, and those employers will figure out either ways to engage with our grads or interview our grads, and that team is just here to support you guys and evangelize for you with industry partners. So what are these tactics specifically? I mentioned the job search framework, which we also call our career services commitment, and that's kind of the list of things to do to set yourself up for success in the job search. So you can read the whole career services commitment at this link at the bottom of the slide, and I think we're going to send out the slides following the presentation, so you guys will have them. But there's really three main buckets of things that we require in this career services commitment. And again, we've built these requirements, we've built this framework, looking at what made students successful in the past, and how can we codify that and make it super, super clear so that students can have a framework to follow that they know will make them successful in the search. So the first bucket is contact real people. Fallacy number 2 of the job search is that applying to jobs is how people get jobs. That's just not true. People get jobs from people. People do not get jobs from job boards. So what you want to do in a job search is connect with real people. And one of the requirements of our framework is what we'll ask graduates to do is start conversations with at least this many real people every single week. Go to a networking meetup and have a conversation and follow up. Or if you see a job on a job board that you're interested in, find the hiring manager and reach out to them directly. Getting hired is really about, again, making a hiring manager think that you are the best human to do all of these things. And the best way to be able to advocate for yourself is to get in front of a real person. So connect with real people, number 1. The second thing that we ask our graduates always to do is to be transparent and communicative with us and also with employers. I spent a couple minutes talking about the career counselor and kind of all of the value that they offer in the process to our students. And one of the things that we ask throughout in working with us throughout this process is let your career counselor know what's going on. Give us the opportunity to really support you and point out kind of suggestions or strategies that you might not have thought of while you're going through the search. And the third one is really, be a great job seeker in so much as you're continuing to make it clear to employers that you're going to learn fast, that you're going to be a contributor to the community, and that you're going to be able to do this job. So the way that we articulate that in our job search framework is keep coding, keep reflecting on what you learn by blogging about it, and really make it clear through your presence online that you are committed to this and that you are continuing to get better. So let's say you're doing all these things, you're blogging, you're continuing to code, you're reaching out to individual humans related to your job search, and all of this is bearing fruit and you get an interview. That is pretty exciting. What do you do once you're there? How do you take those concepts of being a no-brainer hire, thinking about what the hiring manager wants, and translate them into what you do during an interview? So I think, I've mentioned this already. The first thing to do is really put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes. Figure out, again, what is important to this person. What is this person looking for? And we've talked about that. They want to know that you can do the job, that you can contribute broadly to the team, and that you can learn fast. And so think hard about everything you do in this interview process, both before you get there, while you're in the interview, and after you leave, that can demonstrate those things to the hiring manager. So one great way to do this is using the interview as a chance to learn something. Let's say you go to a technical interview and you totally bomb it. You could not answer the question, you've actually never heard of the method or the algorithm they're asking you for, you don't understand what they even want you to do, total mess. You can redeem yourself from that just by demonstrating that you can learn something. So remember the question, write it down, go home, solve it in 3 different languages. Solve it and build a interface on top of it so that the hiring manager can go interact with it. There are lots of ways to demonstrate that you've learned something throughout this process, but it's actually pretty easy with a technical interview. You can just go home and solve the problem better. The next kind of way to make the most of your interview is to find a way to contribute something, right? Demonstrate that you are interested in being a great member of this organization and will contribute outside of just kind of the specific tickets you're supposed to be solving. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but one great way to do that is ask the hiring manager what keeps them up at night. Come up with a solution for that and send it over. It doesn't have to work. It doesn't have to be something that actually makes sense for the business because you're not going to have enough context to do that. But a candidate who demonstrates during their interview that they're going to go above and beyond to contribute in ways that they haven't been asked, I would want to work with that person. When you're leaving an interview process, a really good question to ask yourself is, would I hire me given my performance? Would I want to work with me given everything that I've just done in that process? And if the answer is no, or even maybe, you can do more to demonstrate how enthusiastic you are and how much you're willing to contribute. So to kind of get even more specific, one of the things that we always say to graduates in interview processes are, what value did you add, right? Kind of going back to this last slide, making the most out of your interview is really demonstrating value, adding value. And again, if you're in an interview process and you're at the code challenge step and they're interviewing 10 people and you pass the code challenge and so do 8 other people, you're now no better or worse than 8 people. 2 people are out of the running, but you're on par with 8 people. And so what can you do to kind of set yourself apart and really elevate your candidacy in a way that other candidates might not be doing? So here are some ideas from Flatiron grads. We're always pushing graduates to think about this. What value are you adding to the interview process that's unique to your candidacy? I love these. And this is one of the things that our career coaches really work closely with students on, is how can you get creative to set yourself apart? Here are a couple of really great examples. One is looking, and these are all things that real graduates did and got jobs. So one is looking at the company's code and contributing to it. If you get into a company's GitHub account, look at how they're using technology, and actually submit a change that gets requested, I feel like that is almost always you at least get an interview. So think about demonstrating value, demonstrating that you can learn, demonstrating that you're going to be a contributor at this company, making a pull request and bettering the company's technology without being asked and without being an employee absolutely demonstrates all of those things. You can learn the company's code, and you have. You're going to contribute broadly. You're not just doing what was asked in the interview process. You're actually going out of your way to make the company better. So Lucas did this in his job search process, found the company's GitHub account, and submitted a change to the code. And needless to say, he got that job. It's kind of one of the best ways to set yourself apart as a candidate, really get to know the company's technology and actually try to improve it. Another kind of related idea, and Kavan did this at Kimi, where he really wanted to work and is now an iOS engineer. Maybe the company's source code is not public. Maybe what they're working on is, you can't find a way to improve it. A lot of companies have APIs and libraries that are public, and you can build using them. So maybe it's not something for the company specifically, but using the company's technology to build something on your own is another fantastic way to demonstrate that you're particularly enthusiastic about this organization, you're invested in their process, you're definitely doing more to demonstrate your interest and your commitment than most candidates. And thinking about demonstrating that you can learn fast, a company's #1 concern about a new technologist, a new developer, is going to be, can they learn our technology quickly enough to contribute? Building something with that company's library or API, or even kind of an analogous technology that's similar to what they use, absolutely demonstrates those things and can even allay a common concern about hiring a new technologist. Can they learn fast enough to get something built? If you can do that within the span of an interview process, that's a giant win for your candidacy. So those are really great technical examples, but what about culture? What about kind of being a good contributor to the team, and things that aren't technical? So Kristen was in the running for a role. She was living in, I think, Brooklyn. She was living in New York City, and she was in the running for a role in Rochester. And the company's concern was actually not at all technical. They actually thought, I don't know if this person is interested in living in Rochester. She says she is, but we're not really sure that that's actually the case. So Kristen wrote a blog post on her technical blog, not about anything technical, but about things she was excited to do in Rochester. She wrote about the Science Museum and the ice skating rink, and she really researched this company's community, and wrote about why she was excited to join it. She got that job and is now the lead developer at that company. And again, this is about putting yourself in the hiring manager's shoes. This concern was not technical. The company wanted to know that Kristen was genuinely excited to be where they were, and join their team. Knew she was excited about the technology, wanted to know she was excited about the non-technical factors. And Kristen really put herself in the hiring manager's shoes and thought about how she could address that specific concern, which led her to get the job. Another example, so we've talked about using the company's technology, contributing to the company's technology, really focusing on the company specifically. This one's a little bit different. So Anna was in the running for a job and was going through the technical interview process and really wanted to demonstrate that she could learn fast and refactor and always be getting better. So what she did was went back to a project that she's already done and made improvements and actually made the code better. And I think what this demonstrates to employers is that you're the kind of engineer who's going to be always trying to learn and always trying to improve, which we know with code is extraordinarily important. So if you're looking for a way to contribute throughout the interview process and can't quite figure out how to align it directly with a company, making improvements on something you've already done is a great way to demonstrate that you're committed to getting better and can learn really fast by improving code that you wrote maybe just a couple months ago. And finally is Dawn. This is a great example of kind of committing to the company specifically, and again, maybe in a way that's not technical. So Don was in the running for a software engineering job that he also ultimately got at a company for which he didn't really have any projects that specifically spoke to what the company did. And so what he did was he created a project that wasn't specifically in their technology, but used their theme and branding and kind of concepts that they worked with regularly to prove that he was committed to their process. It was obvious to the company that Don had built this project just for them, and that was what kind of pushed them over the edge to make him an offer. Okay, so we're a little past 12:30, and so we've got plenty of time for questions, and I will stop talking here. Hope that this has been useful and take some questions from you guys.
Yeah. So one question that's a pretty direct follow-up from the section on creative ways to wow companies. If you write a blog post addressing a concern of the company, how would you let them know that you wrote it?
Great question. So I'm a big fan of kind of coloring outside the lines in these processes. At the very least, you should be following up with a company every week, at least every week, probably until they tell you to stop. So one of those follow-ups should absolutely be, hey, I was thinking about this interview process and how excited I am by moving forward, and I really wanted to demonstrate XYZ. I really wanted to demonstrate how fast I could learn Java because I know that that was something that you mentioned as a concern. I really wanted to demonstrate that I had been thinking about this business problem that you have and how we might start to address it with code. I really wanted to demonstrate how committed I am to this process, and so I redid my resume in your brand, font, and colors. There is never a bad time to email an employer and let them know that you're thinking about them and that you've done something extra to make yourself stand out. So the short answer is via email. And the longer answer is it's always okay to follow up with a company and let them know how much you've been invested in this process and how much you're doing to make yourself stand out.
Awesome. So another question that we have is how do boot campers with no college degree fare in the job search?
Interesting question. So I would say they fare pretty similarly to other graduates. In our most recent outcomes report, we actually reported separately on our tuition-based web program, our tuition-based iOS program, and our fellowship programs, which were free for low-income New Yorkers, many of whom did not have a college degree. And the placement rates are pretty much the same, 99% for web, 96% for iOS, and 92% for those fellowship programs. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit harder to convince an employer that you are committed, or maybe you'll have to work on some things that your classmates learned in college, like writing skills or research skills. But there's nothing about not having a college degree in and of itself that has made our students less successful. So I would say understanding your value and your story and what you have to offer, which is the same as for anyone with a college degree. Being self-aware about what it is that you are great at and what it is that you might need to improve, which again is the same as for anyone with a college degree, and really kind of maybe going the extra mile to let an employer know that you're committed to this because they can't see it in your major, or they can't see it in the work that you did in college, and build your portfolio up to make yourself stand out. But yeah, nothing about that is inherently different from someone who has a college degree. So I would say just go full throttle on all the stuff that we've talked about.
Awesome. So say someone is interviewing for a role and they get to the final round of interviews, but they don't get a position. How can they go about getting constructive feedback for the next time they apply for a job?
This is actually one of the areas where I think our career counselors are really valuable, because oftentimes employers won't give you feedback. It's not their job to give you feedback. By the time they reject you, they're kind of finished with your candidacy. They've moved on to something else, and it's no longer their priority. So getting constructive feedback from employers is actually pretty hard. They're not obligated to send it, and they're not incentivized to send it, given kind of what they want to accomplish and what they need to focus on. So I would say kind of the opposite. If you do get constructive feedback after an interview process that you don't complete, that is a gift, and you should really think hard about what is included there. But most of our students we see don't get specific feedback from employers, that's something that I would expect throughout this process. And part of what your career counselor is there for is to reflect on what's gone on and really try to be introspective about what could have gone better, and how you might change, and move forward further in the next process.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. Another question that we got, specifically about the jobs report, sounds like somebody has been taking a look and is curious about, the split between people who are graduating and getting full-time jobs versus those who are getting internships or apprenticeships. Can you shed a little bit of light on, where that split comes from?
So I think that the split between apprenticeships and internships is something we've seen since we started Flatiron School. And I would think about starting this process as a new engineer, kind of like being a junior in college. So if you are switching careers, you might have a lot of really valuable experience from your past career and communication skills and cross-functional collaboration and probably domain-specific skills related to whatever you did before, but you don't have any work experience as a software engineer. And so our approach with our graduates is one of the best ways to start your career as an engineer is to take an internship. A lot of these professional careers, like as a consultant or a banker, will expect that you've had at least one internship before you take your first full-time job. And so taking an internship is a really great way to get some professional experience on your resume. So we are extraordinarily supportive of students taking internships or contract work so long as they're paid as their first job. And we know from talking to our alumni that the best way to get a job as an engineer is to get a job as an engineer, which is to say the second you have any professional experience on your resume, it's much, much easier to have those conversations about getting professional experience as an engineer. So really, we encourage our graduates to pursue, any reasonable, that is like paid, real coding, working with people that are doing, a real company, any experience that's an employment experience as a software engineer, we absolutely encourage our grads to take. So part of the reason I think that you see a lot of internships and apprenticeships is that we help our graduates actively pursue them. Another thing that I'll say on that is when we surveyed our grads, when we surveyed our alumni, we saw that they're all kind of moving up in compensation and level at similar rates and quite quickly in their first 3 years out of Flatiron School. So again, our approach is that the sooner you can get that first job, the sooner you can be on that upward path.
Great. So time for a question that we get in almost every webinar. I think a lot of people are curious to know what are the opportunities like for folks who are a little bit older, maybe not fresh out of college and attending a boot camp, but have already had a bit of a career and are looking to change things up?
I love this question. We do get it in every webinar. So one of the great things about being a career changer is you have real differentiated value that you can point to in the interview process. So as a new grad, maybe it's degree, maybe it's major, maybe that person has had a couple of internships, but as an experienced professional who's changing careers, you have domain expertise in something, you have experience working across teams, you know what it's like to be held to and hit goals, you understand the urgency of projects and how to communicate that. Maybe you've even managed people, maybe you're great at managing up, maybe you have domain-specific knowledge in medicine or law or journalism. These things really can help you sell yourself to a company and demonstrate the value that you can bring outside just your technical skills. So I think being a career changer, I mean, we work almost exclusively with career changers. We work with a ton of career changers. And I think the secret to that is learning how to tell your story in a way that really leverages your past experience and definitely does not hide it. Another thing I'll say about career changers is that employers actually tend to really like that. Maybe employers with a bigger team will have hired a lot of new grads from college and be looking to fill gaps that, new grads have X, Y, and Z benefits of being close to the curriculum or majoring in the discipline or whatever it was. But maybe they don't have as many cross-functional collaboration skills or experience communicating with executives. And you might have that, and you might be able to fill that in for the team. So a lot of managers actually really value that experience. I think that one of the leveraging your experience in your story is kind of one of the secrets to doing that successfully. But another one is just figuring out how to communicate that you are committed to this path. So that can take a lot of different forms, but again, not hiding the fact that you're a more experienced professional. You might want to say something like, let's say you're coming from a long career in investment banking. You might want to say something like, hey, I was an investment banker before. Here's the reason that I made the switch. I fell in love with Excel macros, and I realized that's what I wanted to do all day long. And I was actually excited to move into this new industry. And I know, and here's the compensation range that I'm expecting because I've done research on what that would be. So you might want to allay concerns that you're too expensive. You might want to try to build your narrative in such a way that just makes it obvious that this is where you landed. So again, if you were an investment banker, I was really interested in finance and I studied economics, and but once I got into my job, I found myself just in love with programming Excel, and then I taught myself Visual Basic, and kind of bring someone on that journey of why you landed here as a software engineer. That will also give folks comfort around the fact that you're committed to this career and this is the career that you want. So a couple of things I would, to summarize about being a more experienced job seeker, definitely figure out how to leverage your past experience. Don't hide it, lean into it, because that's really valuable for employers that you're bringing skills from your past career. And then the second one is understand how to tell your story in a way that lands you here as kind of the natural next step. You're doing this for a reason. You committed to making this career change. You committed to learning these skills, and it was hard, and you did it. And so make sure that employers understand that and all of the work that you've already put in, and that it's not that this is just something that you're trying, but you've decided this, and you're committed to it. You kind of make sure to get that across, and I think, employers really value both of those things, past experience and commitment to changing a career.
Great. That was an awesome answer. I hope that
Thanks,
gives
Emily.
a lot of people confidence and inspiration to sort of take the leap. This is a great question that I don't know that we've gotten before in one of these webinars. How important is it to build up your online presence, such as your LinkedIn profile and maybe for developers, GitHub, things like that?
Yeah, I was talking to a student yesterday about this. I think this is a great question. So if you're a new engineer, whether you're a career changer or not, you want someone to stumble upon all of your collateral, all of your touch points, all the places they might find you, and come away with a cohesive story that they can easily understand. So I would say your online presence is extraordinarily important, and you want to be really thoughtful about how all of those things that come up when someone Googles you, or all the things you're presenting in your resume, demonstrate the same cohesive, sensical story about how you are now an engineer and this is how you got here. So let's say we're talking about your website, your LinkedIn profile, your Twitter account, your blog, and your resume. You want to think about all the places that someone might find you, and this is the example that I gave to the student I was talking with yesterday is, if you Google me, you'll see all this no-brainer hire stuff, right? You'll see that I work at Flatiron School, you'll see that I tweet about our outcomes, you'll see that I'm really excited when students get jobs, and if you're talking to me in this context, that kind of makes sense. You're like, okay, Rebekah works at Flatiron School around getting students jobs, around working in career services, working with employers, outcomes, stuff like that. Makes sense. Now, if I was applying for a job as an architect, people would be pretty confused. People would look around my online presence and say, it seems like she does this other thing. And so if you're changing careers, you want to be cognizant of building up an online presence that demonstrates I'm an engineer. So that's having a really active GitHub. That's maybe deploying a few projects and putting your name on them so that they're searchable. That's having a blog that's technical, that talks about all of the code that you're writing. That's having a resume that points to all those places and kind of lays out your online presence in a cohesive way for an employer. And again, we talk about kind of the value of a career counselor when we already have this great curriculum and we already have the job search framework. A career counselor will look with you through your online presence and kind of think about how you look to the outside world and how we can build collateral that really demonstrates that you are an engineer. So the initial question was, how important is your online presence? I would say pivotal, because everyone will Google you. And I think key to that is understanding your narrative, being clear about what that is, and finding a cohesive way to kind of pepper it across all of your online collateral.
Awesome. I would tend to agree with that. Another question that we get all the time, and I think that a lot of your answers from the age question might apply to this, but if you're somebody who didn't study any CS or even science or math in college, maybe has a really humanities-heavy background, are there any particular tips in breaking into tech?
Yeah, I think a lot of those same career changer pointers do apply. But I guess I would preface this by saying there's nothing inherently less engineering about having a humanities degree than about having a biology degree, right? Code is building blocks, code is methodical, code is logical. We all know that. But code is also poetic. Code is expressive. Code is communicative. If you've ever worked in a code base where people didn't name their variables appropriately, you know what that's like. And looking at beautiful code, you can tell what it's trying to say to you. And that's music, that's art, that's writing. So I don't think there's anything inherently kind of non-engineer about having a degree like that. And I've actually heard from employers really fantastic feedback about folks with those kinds of backgrounds who are musicians or writers. We had one woman who's a translator. And when candidates are able to draw connections between kind of these more expressive, poetic, artistic parts of coding and what they did before, employers really appreciate that. Because again, we all, the new grads that are getting hired out of computer science degrees might approach problems in that kind of more mathematical, methodical, very heavy on the analytics and logic way. But if you can supplement that with a candidate who is trying to really write beautiful code and be expressive and write code for other engineers to read and enjoy reading, that is extraordinarily valuable to have on a team. So I think all of the same career changer tips apply, which is make sure that it's clear that this is the path that you've chosen, that you're invested in this career. Make sure that your narrative and your online presence and all of the collateral that you're presenting to an employer expresses that, but don't be afraid, again, to kind of own the way that code is similar to art or poetry or music and express that. I think that folks really appreciate that in the hiring process.
And if someone is, with this humanities background, or anyone at all really, is just sort of starting to think about coding as a career, how should they get started? What's the first thing they should do?
Yeah, so really anyone starting to think about code, I would say the first thing to do is try to write some code, figure out if you like it. One of the things that we really invested heavily in building here at Flatiron School was ways into the curriculum. So we have a completely free bootcamp prep course that's tailored for beginners. We have, I think, over 200 hours of free content in all. If you go to flatironschool.com and kind of navigate through learning online to our free content, you're going to want to try it out, right? We would never say commit to starting a boot camp before knowing what it's like to look at or read or write code. So try out some content here or elsewhere on the internet. There are tons of places you can start to code for free, and I would kind of just jump in.
Totally. This is a really interesting and specific question. So say someone is interviewing, they maybe already graduated from a boot camp, and they have a lot of almost finished projects. Are those things that they can present to employers? How should they talk to employers about those unfinished projects?
That's a really good question. So I think, having any projects in any state is better than having no projects, for sure. But if we're going back to kind of those no-brainer hire tips, think about what this employer is trying to figure out. Can you learn really fast? Will you contribute? Will you be the kind of employee who kind of just gets it done and does more than they're asked? To me, as a hiring manager, seeing a lot of unfinished projects would imply maybe this person dabbles, maybe they don't want to finish, maybe they want to do the easiest first 80% but not finish the really hard last 20%. You also want to think about how your projects look as compared to maybe other candidates. So if someone's coming in with like a really polished interactive front end and no bugs in their project, and your project is complicated but not done, I would say like the candidate with the finished polished thing looks better. A counterpoint to that is, employers might find it impressive if you tried to tackle a problem so big and so unreasonably complex that you never could have reasonably finished that project. So I think that might be a good reason to have an unfinished project, is that you tried to do something so ambitious that it wouldn't be feasible for you to complete it. But in general, you want to put your best, most polished foot forward for employers. And so while it's okay to show an unfinished project, I would say better take a week to just finish them. Take a week to deploy them. Make them really pretty. I think that would put you above and beyond a candidate who just finished their program and then didn't go back to complete their projects. Tough love.
Tough love. Gotta have it. So this question is also getting a lot of interesting ones this time around, which I love. So this is from someone who is considering going to a boot camp. They want to go to a boot camp in New York, maybe Flatiron, but they're looking to find employment in San Francisco. Is it wise to go to a boot camp in New York? What have we seen from folks who maybe go to Flatiron but look for jobs elsewhere?
I would say choosing a school is about choosing the school that's right for you. So try to do a ton of research, call the school, try to talk to real people, try to understand what the career services process is like, because we, for example, we have a large employer network. We have the largest employer network in New York where most of our students are, but we also have a wide network of career coaches. We have over a dozen career coaches who work with us regularly and have significant rosters of students and have seen dozens to over 100 students through this job search process. And those career coaches work with their students wherever they are. So a big part of our career services process is providing support to students where and when they need it. We had a student who's located in Athens, where we do not have employer partners, but he had a career coach who worked with him consistently for months. And when we asked him what he would tell his new job seeker self at the end of the program, when he got a job, and has completed his work with us, he said, I would lean more on my career coach. So you really want to understand, whether you're planning to move or not, to be totally honest, what that, if your goal is employment, what that boot camp provides as far as career services support. To kind of, I guess, the short answer to the question is we worked with tons and tons of students who have either moved or are doing our full stack web developer program online and are not here at all. So I would say one of the most important parts of being successful in the job search is when you are job searching, being or having the ability to be physically where you want to get that job. But I don't think where you learn is necessarily as important.
For sure. A question that we've gotten a couple of times, what differences have we seen in the success rate for online students versus in-person students?
Yeah, so you can download both reports at flatironschool.com/outcomes. The placement rates are the same. So the report that we just put out yesterday, which is for just over 300 job seekers from our in-person program, has a 97% job placement rate across all of our programs. 99% for the web program, which is, I guess, the analogous one to our full stack web developer online program. And the outcomes report that we put out for our online program specifically earlier this year also shows a 97% job placement rate. One of the reasons we do this webinar, and one of the reasons that we have built all of these resources for students to communicate what a great job search looks like, is because it's universal. A great job search looks the same. I mean, not the same, but more or less the things you do are going to be equivalent, whether you're in Cleveland or Cincinnati or New York City or San Francisco. So our online students are required to pass all of the same kind of rigorous coding challenges as our in-person students to graduate, and work with their career coaches in the same ways, and we've seen the same success rates.
Awesome. Well, I think we have time for one more question, so I'll just say, is there one thing that someone can do to their resume that will make them stand out to a hiring manager or make them seem like a no-brainer hire?
No. So it's harder than that, right? It's going to depend on who you are and what your background is. I don't think I've ever seen a resume that makes me say, like, this is the one, because you want to know more about that person. And significantly, you want to know why they're a good fit for your company. So I would say, you know, the one thing you can do in the hiring process to stand out is to really invest in your processes, really be thoughtful and custom about who you're talking to, what they want, and what your value is to them. Telling your story is important, having a polished resume and portfolio is important. Obviously, being great at your skill is important. But in the hiring process, employers really want to know that you can do a good job for them. And so while you're talking about yourself, think about how you can kind of address in that narrative how yourself is going to be a great contributor for that organization.
That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, I think we want to wrap it up. I think we have one more slide.
All right. If you want to learn more, there's an ebook at nobrainertechhire.com that has a ton of this content included in it. It's a really good reference guide, actually, if you're job seeking with us, or if you're planning to come here and thinking about what the job search might be like. It's good reference material to look at about kind of how do you think about running a job search that makes you a clear choice for employers. And if you want to hear more or see more about our outcomes, you can go to flatironschool.com/outcomes, and you can download that online report that I referenced, the outcomes report that came out yesterday about our New York City programs, and all of our other outcome reports from previous years.
Awesome. Well, I think that about wraps us up. So thank you, Rebekah, for taking the time. And
thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. See you next time.